And the story that I'm going to tell you today is about two warriors. So everybody can hear me well, right? Yeah. Okay. So once upon a time, a very long time ago, there were two warriors. And during that time, there was a war that was happening. And in that war, there was a battle that was being fought. Now, this battle was fought between two very aggressive enemy camps. So the battle started early in the morning when the sun rose, and it continued through the day. And by the time the sun was almost setting, it was almost evening, every soldier in both the enemy camps were dead, except for two warriors. And these two warriors stood face to face with each other. Now, they were so tired, they could barely hold their swords in their hand. So one warrior said to another, "You know, there is no honor in fighting like this when this is the way we feel, and the sun is almost setting. So why don't we do a thing? Why don't we both rest here on the battlefield? And tomorrow morning, when the sun rises, we will both fight a battle. And only one of us will go back home." The other warrior agreed. And so both the warriors took off their helmets, they put their swords away, and they decided to get some sleep on the battlefield. So they lay down on the battlefield among the many dead soldiers. And both the warriors were trying to get some sleep, some rest, but they just could not. You know that feeling sometimes when you're just too tired, you won't fall asleep? It was probably much more than that because they had seen so much of killing and fighting around them. So both of them tried to fall asleep, but they just could not. And in that darkness, one warrior said to the other, "You know, back in my village, I have a son. And they tell me that he's a good horse rider, but I haven't seen him for many, many months." And then the other warrior spoke. He said, "You know, back in my village, I have a daughter. And everybody tells me that she's very good at sword fighting. I hope that when she grows up, she's a much better warrior than I am." And so the two warriors started exchanging stories. They shared stories about their families, about their village. They shared stories that they had heard in their childhood when they were at the feet of their grandparents. And they shared stories about their conquests and the battles that they had fought. And by the time all the stories were shared, it was morning. So the two men got up. They wore their helmets. They drew their swords. And they looked at each other. And they looked at each other in their eyes. And they turned back and they went home. So, Madhuri, typically in my sessions, I tell stories to children, and I never say that, you know, this is what you learn or this is the moral. I always ask them. So, I would like to ask you, what is your take on this story?
Well, it's a lovely story of how you can build emotion and empathy among people who are not even friends before. Um, and the story is a beautiful example of me because I totally resonate with this. Um, every time we are talking to our children about experiences, and this happens quite, when you have a teenager and I have a preteen, I see that children are quite rebellious at this age. And the same thing when goes in a form of preaching, they are not ready to listen to us. However, when we are saying the same thing in a form of experiential stories, or things that I might have done and narrated in a way that it looks like, oh, well, it was an experience, somehow it sits more well with the children. So this story actually is all about building human connection with people through stories. That's my understanding. And we have so many audience here. Please share your also understanding as well about this story. Anyone, please share your inputs as well.
Yeah, because I think everybody has a
So
different take. Yeah.
I think through these stories, like one thing, you always build a real life connect with children. Just to add on to what you were saying, Madhuri, and I think this whole experience of this story, like the takeaway was when they decided that they would fight. It was like one of them would come out of it alive, but through the power of stories, they both managed to go out of it alive. So I think that was a great positive.
Connectivity and how we connect to others. Main communication, how much we talk to each other, we will understand each other.
Anybody else would like to share their views about the story? Okay. So, Swati.
So I think I'll get back to the question, yeah, that you asked me. So just a short introduction about myself. It usually happens that we try to go in search of a job or a career, right? I mean, that's what I also did when I was studying and when I finished my post graduation. But I think in some cases, a career finds us, and that's what happened to me when I turned into a storyteller. So basically, I have a graduate degree in commerce and a post graduation in business management. It's only in 2016 that I did my diploma. See the way that he had. So yeah, that's basically about me.
Yeah. Thank you, Swati, for sharing that. Um, so you were sharing that you started this journey when you were in US with me. You know, before this session, you were talking about how you started this. Can you can you give a brief background as to what motivated you to start this? Was
Yeah.
it your child or was it the love for stories? What was it exactly that you decided to do this?
Yeah, so while I started Story Ki Bori about 10 years ago, I think the seeds of this were sown much, much before. I would say in my own childhood. Because, like many of us, my mother and my two grandmothers were extremely good storytellers. So, whenever I fell sick, or I made a fuss to eat food, or I wanted to go to sleep, there would always be a story that my mother or my grandmothers would come up with. So, I think that's where, the whole thing started. My father was a person who, used to buy a lot of books, especially the ones of Reader's Digest. They used to come up with these lovely encyclopedias and books on nature and technology. So I think I was always surrounded by books. And I never realized it at that point of time that how important an environment is for you to grow in a certain direction. But now, as a parent, as an educator, I'm understanding the importance of it. So there were always books around me. There were always people around me who were reading. I had a maternal uncle who would always gift these lovely storybooks. And not only that, when we went to his house in every vacation, he would get all of us cousins to sit and he would read aloud books. Read aloud was, now it's become like a buzzword, but there was no read aloud happening back then. But he would make all of us sit and read books, not only in English, but also in my mother tongue, that's Kokni. So he would get all these lovely, Kokni poems and stories, and he would read it aloud to all of us. And those were times that I really enjoyed. And I think that kind of stayed with me over the years. So it was but natural that, when my son was young, when he was at a time when he could understand a few things, I exposed him to books, I exposed him to stories, I did read alouds with him. And that's how it all started. And when my son was about 2 years old, we were in the US for a year. That's the time I started taking him to the libraries. And it was really good because, you could even get up to 99 books in one go. So we would take this big sack with us because we would go only once a week. So we would take this big sack, like a bag with us, fill it up with some 40, 50 books. And my son had like a voracious appetite for books. So every day we would be sitting and reading those books. There was no family there. So it was a good way to spend time together. And more than that, we attended story time where the parent and the child could go, and this lady would come and she would have a lot of books with her. She would tell stories, do read aloud, sing, and the kids would really enjoy it. I know my son enjoyed it, but I think I loved it more than him. So when I came back, it stayed with me. And when my son was about 5 years old, he started going to school for longer hours. A part of me was saying, I have to get back to a job, I have to get back to my corporate job. But I thought, that will not help me to strike a balance. Traffic in Bangalore is just too demanding. Jobs are very, very demanding. So I said, this won't work for me. So that's when I said, why don't I try story time? I enjoyed it so much. So I started this small thing in my house, and a few kids from the community came, and we did a story time session for a few days, and I got a very good response. So then the parents said, why don't you do it in the next vacation? So that's what I did. Didn't know where this was going, but I was enjoying myself. I was happy. So I just continued on that path. And then when we did it for the summer vacation, we did it over a month. So, I got the kids to put up a small skate. We called the parents home and they saw. And most of them told me that, my child used to literally shiver when he or she used to go on stage. But in this 1 month, we are seeing such a transformation. These kids are so confident and they're doing so well. So why don't you do this like a regular after school program? So I said, okay, let me see where it goes. And I took it up. And that's the way Story Ki Bori started. And then when I saw that it was growing, 3 years after that, I said, I need to hone my skills, sharpen my skills a little bit. And that's when I did my diploma in storytelling through Kathalaya, which was extremely helpful to, fine tune what I was already doing. Before that, it was all self-taught. So that's how it was.
So yeah, so from a parent who was actually taking the Bori to fill all the books, now you are giving story ki Bori to others. That's interesting journey.
Yeah, you put it in a good way, Madhuri.
So one thing that I would like to ask over here, because you have been into this, and then you were saying that your uncle also used to, read aloud stories, not just in English but also in your mother tongue. Do you see any language gap, or some when you are introducing stories to children, do you see any shift in terms of language development? Why I'm asking this is because nowadays English has become such a common language that even while we are speaking in our own mother tongue, we tend to use many English words. And um, especially in our child psychology or Montessori philosophy, when we are understanding the language development, we also learn that language actually is acquired by a child when it comes in its complete entirety, which means that the language that we are using should have only the words in the mother tongue if we are talking in our mother tongue, or the grammar is also proper. Now what happens is, when we are actually communicating with our children nowadays, most of the time what is happening is we are mixing the languages quite often. How do you think it impacts the child, in good or a bad way? I would like to know that.
Yeah, see, I agree with you that, mother tongue is really taking a backseat, especially I think in nuclear families in urban cities. It's all the more because parents also tend to speak in English to their children. I have seen that where there are grandparents living in the same family, the mother tongue is more often used. So I think it's even in our programs, we encourage children, we do a week where we do like mother language day, so that kids at least make the attempt to read and speak in their language. Because otherwise, if you don't speak the language, if you don't read the language, if you don't listen to the language, I mean, it'll be extinct very soon. And with that, we will lose a lot of our culture and heritage and what we stand for.
Yeah.
Right.
So do you also kind of say, for example, toothbrush, right? We don't actually use a Hindi word for that. I speak in Hindi, so I can just talk about Hindi. And when I'm talking to my child, how am I going to bring this word, introduce this word in their mother tongue through story? Because nowadays children are also getting very comfortable and acquainted with this mixed language. And eventually we are losing away from our own mother tongue. And then as we grow old, like I think all of us will agree with the fact that we all are cribbing about our language dying, our language dying. But how are we supporting our children by using right language, right word in our own mother tongue? So how do you introduce that or encourage in young children?
So while in a formal platform, I may have not done that because in Bangalore you have multiple languages and I speak only Hindi, Konkani, and Marathi. Okay, so but I do encourage them to, even parents to speak to their children as much as possible in your mother tongue, because it's like if you forget your mother tongue, it's like forgetting your mother. So I don't think any of us want to do that. So you get these, lovely books nowadays in every Indian language, very simple books, which are beautifully illustrated, which definitely capture the imagination of young children. So even starting with those books, can help children to be interested in their mother language, read it and get acquainted to it. And I think the most natural way of doing it is to have conversations with them in the mother tongue as much as possible.
Yeah,
Where possible.
I can totally vouch on this. But we being the urban parents, this happened with me when my daughter was very young, and I stay with my extended family. So my in-laws will be speaking in our mother tongue, and for us, darwaza is kewadi, and she would always say kewadi band kar do, kewadi band kar do. And and I was like, why are you speaking this word, why are you using this word? It's darwaza, it's not kewadi. And I realized that at that point I was so disrespectful of my own mother tongue, isn't it? And that was a reflection for me. So now what I decided at home was, and probably I think it can work with any family, is that I let my daughter speak to my in laws in the language that they were using as much as possible. So now what happens is, even though she is not able to communicate or converse in that language as good as the others could, but she is still able to understand everything and understand the syntax, and now she is at least trying. But earlier what was happening is I would stop, I would restrain her from trying the colloquial language, which actually conditioned her in a way that this language is not an in thing, and it's not okay, because people may put you down or not think good about you, or overall I would say that disrespecting of the language. So Yeah, it worked eventually. So probably this is one of the ways that we can definitely introduce different languages. And honestly, I mean, you will also kind of agree with the fact, Swati, that our parents or our grandparents are more close to the local language or our mother tongue than we are. So we must definitely encourage our children to interact with them in the mother tongue with them as much as possible.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so
definitely.
yeah, language development is an amazing part. And you were saying that when you started these workshops during summer breaks, uh, you saw that children's personality was also changing, right? So can you share what was the difference that you saw from the time that children came to your workshop until the time they left?
Right. So I think there are three things that typically parents share with me. I've seen over the last 10 years when their child, joins my classes. So see, most of my programs, after school programs, so they are long term. They typically run for a year, right? Through, like parallel to the academic program. So I typically have kids joining me from the age of 4 years, and they usually stay with me till they are about 8, sometimes till like they're 12. Okay, so it's like the entire formative years they are with me. So typically three things parents tell me. One is some parents tell me my child does not read, therefore I want him or her to, be part of your program. Second thing parents tell me is that my child is not confident on stage. Okay, I totally get it. Third thing which disturbs me is that when parents literally whisper into my ear that my child is an introvert, it's almost treated as a weakness. And my response to them is, I am an introvert. So I don't think there is, very black and there's nothing black and white that extrovert and introvert. I think we're all a mix of, these things. And with some people, we may be a little more introvert, and with the rest, we may be extrovert, or we may be lying somewhere in between. So my first, request to them is, please don't treat it as a weakness. Every child has, a lot of strength, lot of potential. So we have to recognize that what is my child's strength and believe in my child, because I think the greatest gift you can give your child is to trust them and to believe in them. Okay, because it is not enough just for the child to believe in herself or herself. When the child knows that my parent believes in me, it just boosts the child's confidence. They take a leap of faith. Same with educators. If I know my teacher believes in me, I have seen that, even when I was young, if I knew this teacher has trust in me, I would make that extra effort to do well in a subject. So you need just that one person in school and your parents at home to give you that leap of faith. So that's the first thing. So even when I do my programs, my long-term programs, they're typically done in small groups. Okay, so that I know each child, I understand each child's potential, each child's strengths. Okay, because if I do it in large groups, it's as good as a school where you then are bound by time and you don't have the bandwidth to know each child that well. So what I do is I take a small group, I work with each child, I understand each child's potential, each child's strength. And for example, if there is a child who is not interested in reading at all, within a week or 2 weeks, I know what this child is interested in. So I try to do a story, or I get the child to read a book. Let's say the child is interested in cricket. I try to talk to the child, tell stories which are centered around sports or cricket, that theme. So what happens is the child gets interested, right? It's like a hook that you use. Once the child is interested in what you're saying, half the battle is won. After that, through more stories, through different activities which are varied. So I do different activities. It could be music related, could be art and craft, could be quiz, games. So with each of these activities, the child's interest, gets built up. And then they are open to your suggestions, open to coming up on stage, open to reading. So that's what happens. So typically in a year, I see that a child's reading goes up by 50 to 60%. Okay. I have seen that a child who started out with my program would be literally shivering on stage, now says, okay, auntie, I am going to take this role. I want to say this, And so that's the kind of personality change I see. And parents also tell me that we are seeing that, children have developed so many life skills. The communication, even in terms of writing, has improved. Because see, once you are interested in something, you make the effort to work on it. So those are the kind of positive changes that I have seen in children. And parents have come back to me saying that, even the teachers in school have recognized this and said that, yeah, I've seen that the child is reading more, the child is writing much better than what he or she used to. So I think those are the, very evident changes that I have seen in the last 10 years after every long-term program that I have done.
Yeah, I'm sure, because my daughter, I put her in a theater during Dashara break, and she entered as a shy child, but then she gave a stage performance, and it was wonderful to see. I mean, my eyes welled up with emotion seeing her on stage and not fearing at all, because she still has stage fright every time she goes on the stage. But that was the first time when she was saying, "Mama, my stomach is churning, and I won't be able to do this," and all of those stuff. But when she went there, she gave her best. So you are right about two things: one, that children's personality changes, and second, if the educator or the person who is helping the child develop, that one adult the child actually hooks on to emotionally, they really want to give their best with the child, because the connection, the bonding is built so strong. So I agree with both of this. Having said this, now this is a set environment, right, where children are coming and learning about, through stories, they are building their personality and shaping. As a parent, what can parents do at home that will help children develop that interest in stories, reading books, and also in theaters, say acting, right? Many parents also, I mean, many children aspire to act nowadays. All children are kind of interested in acting thanks to Instagram and TikTok. But how can we encourage it positively in children?
Yeah, so I think one thing that parents can do, I mean, very practical thing and simple thing is that, see, if a child is already interested in reading, then you don't have to do much. But if a child is not interested in reading, I think the first thing to do is identify that child's interest, right? If the child is interested in music, just buy 2 or 3 books or borrow 2 or 3 books which are centered around music. Don't, overwhelm the child by buying a truckload of books, because then there's pressure, oh, I have to read. Just get 2 or 3 books centered around music, so that, at least the child opens the book because it is of a subject that he or she is interested in. So that is one, simple thing that can easily be done. Taking them to libraries, maybe to a book reading club if there is anything like that, or any events that happen to in a library. So, when they go there, you have this whole environment of everybody reading and talking about stories and books. I think that has a positive impact on children, and it kind of, encourages them to read. Also, I think what I see is that, in any group that I've taken in the last 10 years, okay, 75 to 80% of the kids are avid readers, in spite of all the screen time we talk about. At least 75 to 80% of the kids are very avid readers, and they read at a much higher level than probably our generation read. Okay, that is the good news. But the not so good news is that this reading does not translate into their writing. So the same children who read at such a high level, they don't write at that level. Not at all. So I've been thinking in the past, few years, why is this happening? They're reading at a much higher level, but, we wrote very good compositions and essays even when we were in 4th grade. But kids who are of 6th and 7th grade also, they just use very mediocre language. So my understanding is that one is technology, the negative influence of WhatsApp and things that encourage you to write in short forms. Okay. So therefore, this whole lethargy of, why to write better? I can just, it's very casual. Everything has become very casual. There is no incentive to, write well. Right. So I think these few things are inhibiting children's development in this direction. I'm sure schools, most of the schools today have different methods to, get children to write better and write creatively. Now, sometimes because, schools also have this pressure of developing multiple skills, right? When we were kids, it was just reading, writing, and arithmetic kind of a thing. But today, schools have to do computers, they have to do robotics, they have to take them to field trips. So I think schools are also out for time. So maybe they are not able to focus or in, these certain things. So introduce some innovative methods, right, of writing. So if you tell them typically that, you should write well, it becomes very preachy. So if they somehow get motivated to write better. And stories is a good way of doing it because, like they say, stories teach without the preach. So it gets the child interested. Innovative methods to write better than what they're doing. So, I think even as educators or even as parents, we should encourage our children, even in a casual conversation, to full sentences, not just say few words and finish it off. Right? I don't know if you've seen, but I've seen it a lot in kids that nowadays, if they don't find the right word, okay, they will say to put in the effort to describe that particular object. I think as parents and educators, we should, encourage the use appropriate words in their daily conversations, because that's how your vocabulary gets built. That's how the language gets built. So I think these are the few that parents can do with the children to build that environment at home.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And one more thing that worked with me is I read every night with my daughter. Every night. She had 3 to 4 set of books which she would want me to read every night, and that actually translated into her reading books on her own. Having said this, yes, I agree that nowadays children actually lack that interest towards writing. So what we do now is when she is reading a book, what I'm asking her to do is to narrate that story in her own words and write just a page. May not be, the entire story in the form of 2 3 pages, but maybe in a page. The other thing that I'm encouraging her to do is, with her cousin sister, I am making her to write a story of her own. So what they have decided is, I'm going to be this character and I'm going to be this character, and then I'm going to write the dialogue for my character and you write for your character, and that is really working for her. So I think these are small things that we can do with older children who can write. But I think the question I would like to know, I mean, I work with children between birth to 3, and and I know that language development is exponential at that age. So, do you have any strategies, or do you have any suggestions for parents with toddlers and infants as to what they can do with their children at home through stories and book reading?
Yeah, I think you can start showing them books at a very young age, even when they are 1 year old. When they're just about sitting, if they're sitting to eat,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Just opening a book in front of them, which is a lot of colors and pictures, grabs their attention. Of course, at that point of time, it's not about reading, but just that getting them used to a book. And then, slowly go wordless, in which through the pictures, it's just the,
Swati,
yeah.
we are losing your connection, so There is a small interruption. Can you repeat? Can you repeat the thing that you said just now?
Yeah, so I said we can start through picture books,
Okay.
just to get the children's, a baby's attention or an infant's attention to a book which has good illustrations, so that they at least have this. They're open to looking at a book, and books we just have one shapes book or an animal book, and this type. With kids of that age, repetition always works. So if you show them, they love that. And while doing that, you can sing a song, a nursery rhyme or whatever it is, something in your mother tongue, and do it every day. They just love it. You can start off in that way, and then slowly take them to stories which have short sentences, or tell them short stories. Puppets is a good way. Even if you just get one puppet at home, or if they have, you can just use that as the character and do the whole story with them. They really enjoy that visual kind of the thing, right? So you can try that. Also, I think when you take them for a walk or you go out, right? You remember we read the story. So remember I told you there was a big tree in that story. So in front of their eyes physically what it is.
Swati? I think we lost her. She'll join again. So, with infants, as she said, I think with every child, there is one thing as parents that we must be sincere about is our consistency. And consistency is basically uh, always read the book at a particular time without fail. So yes, Swati, you are back.
Yeah.
We lost you in between.
Sorry.
Yeah. So you were saying you were talking about how the story that we might have read for our child when we are going outdoors, we are kind of mapping that learning through the real experience in their
Yeah.
environment, right?
Because I think at that age for kids, it's all sensory. And also, like to a beach, you collect a few shells, you collect pebbles, you collect flowers, leaves, all these things. I mean, it might sound like, I mean, what's the big, it is a big deal at that age, because then when they have read it in a book or you told them a story and they can relate to this, it really all fits into together, right? It's not something abstract which is there on a book.
And when we are narrating the stories, generally we see people when they are narrating stories, and I'm sure you must be doing that. The modulation of the voice, right? So, is it okay with doing that with an infant as well, or it's just that we talk actually when we are talking to the children, our voice automatically modulates. But when we are narrating a story, how can we make it more impactful for the child to submit that, register it very well?
See, I think all of us, some of us are professionals, so we take some extra assistance and do diplomas and all that. But all of stories don't come from work. How much who can do voice modulation and go the whole way, it's great. But even without that, I think you can just tell them a story in your own natural way, and kids will listen to you and enjoy the story.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I mean, when we are working in an environment, our trainers would always say, doesn't matter whether you know how to sing or dance, children will still love you if you do that. So yeah, what you say makes so much sense. That's right. Swati, one more thing that I wanted to ask. You have collaborated with so many Montessori schools and preschools. How do you see, and all these children are below 6 years, isn't it? So, what kind of energy level do you see when you are doing these stories with them? And I'm not going to leave you before you do one story with us again in the end. So,
Okay. So yeah, I think they are the best bunch because they literally wait for you at the gate when you will come, and they will all run and they will hug you and all that happens. So full of love, and they just wait for you. And I think at that age, right, the stories that I select, what I talk to them is all based on one fundamental principle that, at that age, there are no 7 wonders in the eyes of a child. There are 7 million,
yeah.
right? They look at everything in so much of wonder that, which we just take for granted. So anything you introduce to them, they just love it. It's just that you have to get their attention and, connect with them. So I think at that age, it's all about making them wonder more and more about the world around them, about themselves, about their friends, everything. So there is no end to what you can do at that age, because curiosity, imagination, festivals, they just love it all. You do the singing, the dancing, the art, craft, and 1 year, 2 years are not enough.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. So, Swati, are you coming up with any workshops in recent time for children? Anytime soon, do you have any plan?
Yeah, so see, for children, my focus has been on mainly on children for the last 10 years. So we keep having events and workshops and after school programs, which are done through the year. But lately, I've also been getting some inquiries from parents where, parents like you asked me, how can I build a positive environment at home? How can I support my child's learning and reading? Maybe what is happening in school is not enough. So what can I do at home? So I'm planning to, work in that direction and roll out a few workshops, maybe exclusively for parents and for parent and child thing where they can interact and we can do some nice sessions and then they can continue that when they go back home. So that is definitely on the cards in the coming months.
Okay, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, last question: what parent should go with in this session? What is your last word of wisdom for the parents over here in this session?
Okay, I think first of all, parents and educators need to understand one thing, that stories are not just for entertainment. There is much, much more power in stories than meets the eye. So, if I could put it in one line, stories are wisdom which is disguised as entertainment.
Yeah.
Okay, so once you recognize the power that stories have, I think you can do so much with it, even as a parent or as an educator, especially in schools. Sometimes you may think, I mean, how can you expect me as a teacher to start every session with a story? But if you understand its potential, that you have got the child hooked onto something, right? After that, you teach them the concepts, but get the child's interest. So I do a lot of science and math stories because as a child, I was so scared of maths. Okay, so I want to help other kids not to have that fear. So I do a lot of math stories. And when you do it with puppets or you do it, just, tell them a story, it just gets them so hooked on. And then, that whole fear is gone of not understanding the subject because it's come through a story. And then you explain the concept to them. So recently I did, because, this whole Chandrayaan 3 was so exciting for everyone. So I recently did a story about the moon and, how it got its craters on them. So there are lots of stories in this. Every, I think, country has folk tales about, all the different shapes that we see on the moon. So I did a story about how man finds out that a tree is medicinal and he starts using its leaves to cure people. But his wife starts getting jealous because she thinks that, he's spending more time with the tree than with her. So she goes to destroy it. And then this man just hugs on to the tree and says, don't destroy my tree. And it prays for the tree not to leave him and go. And so the tree, moves higher and higher into the sky and reaches the moon. So this is a story from Vietnam, and people there believe that if you see the moon, you will see a man with a tree, near a tree. Some other countries have this story about a rabbit who went out of his way for Buddha. And there are many stories. Okay, so at the end of it, it's like, this is the story, but scientists say that these are the craters which are formed on the moon because of the, rocks that hit them long, long ago. So, when you tell them the story and then you explain the science concept, it just fits in so beautifully that, I'm sure they will remember the concept for a much longer time. Like Rudyard Kipling said, right? If history were taught in the form of stories, they would never be forgotten. So there's a lot of potential in classrooms for stories.
Oh, I can relate to this because, yeah, yeah. I think for most of us, history used to be our nighttime lullaby book. Yeah, if at all it was interesting. And I love history now. So I agree with what you are saying. Yeah, Swati, as I said, I'm not going to leave you before you end this session with a story. So please, one story for us.
Sure. Okay. So, okay. Yeah, let me tell you, this is also one of my favorite stories. So this is a story from a time when, televisions were just a new concept. TV or television was a new concept. And there was this television salesman who was going from city to city, town to town, village to village, explaining to people about what a television is and what benefits it will offer. So he went to this village and he stayed there for a couple of days so that he could visit everyone. And what he observed is people would be working throughout the day, doing their jobs, going to school and all that. But when the clock struck 6, everybody would drop what they are doing and they would literally run to a place in the village which had a huge tree. And all of them would sit around that tree and they would share stories with each other. It could be folk stories, it could be mythological stories, or just stories about, what's happening in the village. So that's what happened. He observed this happening every single day. So one day he decided, this is going to be my sales pitch. So he said to the people, I see that all of you love stories. You just drop everything that you have and you rush to that place to share stories. So why don't each of you buy a television? Because this television will tell you stories not only about your village or about your country, it will tell you stories from all around the world. So his sales pitch was so good, that everybody was convinced and each household bought a TV. And the television and that salesman, he literally, laughed his way to the bank. After about 3 months, he was, returning from one of his tours and he passed by this village. So he thought, okay, these people made me really rich. Each of them went and bought a television. So let me go and see how they are doing. So he went to the village. And when he reached the village, he realized that everything had gone really quiet. He could not see anybody outside. He peeked into their windows. There was nobody at home. And then he realized that it was 6 o'clock. So he ran back to that tree. And what he sees there is that all the people are sitting around that tree. And the television sets that he had sold to them are lying in a huge stack like a tower collecting dust. So the man went and said, hey, you guys, what is wrong with you? Each of you bought a television from me and now it's here lying collecting dust. What is the meaning of all this? So there was one old woman. She stood up and she said, look, don't get angry. We loved your television and you're so right. It told us so many stories. But you know what? It only told us stories. It did not allow us to tell our stories. So I think that's what we finally look for as human beings, right? To form connections, to get inspired by each other.
Yeah, I wish today's generation also thought like that old lady. Things would be so different. Yeah, thank you so much, Swati, for your session and your insights. We are open for question and answer. Any of you, if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask, and we are here to answer them. I'll also be sharing Swati's detail via WhatsApp message, so that if you want, you can reach out to her and check for her workshops and other events that she'll be conducting. But yeah, if you have any questions for now, we are open for it. No questions. Swati, did I ask all the questions on their behalf? Yeah, Rajni says thank you for the session. Thank you, Rajni, for attending this session. Priyanka, yeah, you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. It was a lovely session. I have a 3-year-old toddler, a daughter, and simple things like giving her food. I try to tell stories. Uh, of lately, she's stuck to one elephant story, and I try to get different topics in it, but she wants to listen one same old story again and again for every meal, every day. So how do I get out of this?
That's okay. That's a very normal thing with kids of that age.
Okay.
Why do you
So
want?
It's been
Why
months
do you
now.
want? Why do you want to, shift from that story?
I think it's been almost 3 months. She's listening to the same story. So I thought, because she listens so well, I want to tell her more stories at the meal time, because that's the time she actually listens well. So I try getting other things in between, but she's like, no, I want to hear the same old story. I want to hear the same thing, not even a different version of it.
So, Priyanka, if you just realized in your own answer, you said you want, not her, right?
Uh, yeah.
Well, let her enjoy with what she wants and not what you want. Eventually, she will come to what you want, but give her what she wants
Yeah.
at this age.
Okay. I'll try. Thank you.
Yeah,
maybe you
sure.
can take a soft toy and try to tell her some other story and see if it works. If it doesn't, she will outgrow this phase in a couple of weeks or whatever. So
Okay, maybe. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Swati, we have another question from Sangeeta. She says, I have a 2-year-old with slight hearing loss. How can I make my storytelling more effective and interesting for her?
yeah, so Sangeeta, you can again, use a puppet or use a soft toy to, get her, because then she will want to relate more visually, right? So maybe you can use things like that, or use props. Even while reading a book, if there is something in the book, you can show her some props and do it and see if that kind of gets her interest and gets her more interested in the story itself. Do more of the action. So let's say it's a story about somebody eating soup or something like that, then maybe you can actually get a bowl and a spoon and show the whole thing, or show a soft or a puppet actually eating that, so that it becomes visually more appealing to her. That is one way that you could do that.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else with a question? Thanks, Jay, for sending this lovely message. He says, thanks a ton, Swati and Madhuri, for enlightening us through and through. Uh, we'll wait for 2 more minutes and then we'll close the session. So, Priyanka?
Yes,
you, I see that your inclination is more towards introducing her to more stories and other experiences, as much as I'm understanding from what you asked, right?
yes.
Yeah, so not necessarily you can read or narrate a story only while she's eating. I think the best time to read a story or narrate a story is before sleeping, or even sharing our own experiences. It really works because that is the time when the mind is completely at, calm and relaxed. So both for both of you, not just for her, but also for you, because you are absolutely relaxed and calm, and you know that after this you are going to just sleep, right? Uh, that's the best time when you can share more experiences in terms of what you have experienced throughout the day or during past few months or as a child, whatever you want. I mean, this I do with my daughter even now. She's 11 now, and this really works because every time we discuss about things like you know what, that friend of mine, she did this, and then I felt like this. Okay, so there is this whole story behind a particular intention that I want to communicate to her, and I also want to extract information from her. So it really works when I am sharing a story about what happened with me when I met a friend and so things happened. And then she comes out and says, "Oh, yes, Mama, you know what? This happened with me too." And, Swati, I just shared this. So basically, we had this fancy dress competition in my apartment, and I made this paper dress for my daughter, and she was a goddess of reduce, reuse, and recycle. And she had a dialogue to say. Okay, when she went on the stage, as I said, she has a bit of stage fright, but I was pretty much surprised to see that even though she forgot her lines, she was able to, say something. Okay. And when she came back home, she came and she told me, "You know what, Mama, I actually forgot the entire line. But I could rephrase it in my own words." And then she told about her another friend who was also a participant in the event. She forgot the lines and then she started crying because she was so nervous and disappointed of herself. So she comes and tells me, "You know how I was able to say something on stage without basically stumbling over her dialogue? Because I understood what I had to say. So I could rephrase it in my own words." So that's the power of conversation through stories. When you are communicating, you are making the child understand things, and that builds their cognition, that builds their language so strong that because the vocabulary is there, it's not impossible for them to rephrase what they have to express, right? So find those opportunities, especially when you both are relaxed. Don't rush over, because right now when you are feeding the child, your primary goal is to feed her and in between kind of introduce the stories. But her primary aim is to finish the food, listen to it, but not really focus on it. And that is why that repetition is happening. So if you want to introduce her to other
Yeah.
stories, uh, find a separate time for that.
Yes, yes, for sure, ma'am. Maybe the book reading at night time is the best thing to start, like
Yeah,
rigorously. I will do that. Thank you so much.
yeah, sure. Okay, so thank you all for joining. Thank you, Suprita, for your lovely message. She also says thanks to us. And thank you, Usha ma'am, for joining this session here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so introducing Usha ma'am, she is a child behavioral specialist and a child psychologist. And we are going to have our next session on navigating through behavioral challenges with her in the month of October.
Oh,
So
nice.
stay tuned with us, and
Thank,
let's have, and please come prepared with
thank
questions this time, because we are going to find out solutions and practical strategies on working with your children at home.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mandir. Thank you, ma'am. Swati, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
So thank you, everybody. You have a good weekend ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Yeah.
Thanks, Madhuri.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you,
you, ma'am.
Swati. Yeah.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye, everyone.